Hey everyone, Steven here, and welcome to my little library of horrors. So, about a month or two ago, while I was reorganizing my library, or organizing in general, I should say, I stumbled across something that I hadn't seen since my high school years, and kind of honestly forgot that I had even owned it. And just kind of seeing the cover right away just, filled me with tons of nostalgia and, the few rare good memories I have out of high school and my teenage years. And, something really made me want to revisit it as I flipped through the pages and I was, kind of just glancing over the story and things like that. And something inside me was like, I wonder I wonder if there was something I missed in this story because I had read it at such a young age and focused on the wrong thing about it. And so I decided to look back into it. And thankfully, my wife was nice enough to get me a copy of a collection, and that book is the director's cut of Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. Now, I was first introduced to Johnny back in high school. I was going through my goth phase back in 8th grade, beginning of freshman year, and it's funny to think back on that now because we were never called goths back then. We were called freaks, so I'm not really sure when the term goth kind of got coined back then. But one day, one of my buddies came up to me in the lunchroom and was like, "Hey, man, have you heard of this new comic that just came out? It's tons of swearing, lots of violence, and stuff like that." And I was like, "Oh no, I haven't heard of it, but toilet humor, violence, and foul language. I mean, sign me up. Teenage me was all about it." And yeah, so that's when I kind of got first introduced to the series. And, I really loved it at the time as a teenager. I loved it, obviously, for the reasons I mentioned. But one thing that really kind of struck me when I started to delve deeper into it was sort of the message behind the story. The deeper meaning behind the violence and the foul language. And I don't think I truly got a good grasp of it back then. Like I said, I was more focused on the gratuitous violence and the language and things like that. It was something I shouldn't be reading, you know. But of course, that makes me want to read it more. And so, yeah, I really wanted to revisit Johnny with a more mature mind, a more experienced reading mind, especially in horror literature. Um, because this is really, it kind of walks the line of horror and, um, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, to me, it is horror. Like, there's tons of things that make it a horror book, but that's besides the point. So, what did I think of it? Well, a lot actually. Um, so the story of Johnny the Homicidal Maniac tells the tale of the character Johnny, who goes by the nickname Nee. Um, he's essentially a tormented soul that is struggles with his compulsions of murder and wanting to completely shut himself off as a human being. Um, he's constantly filled with existential dread, is is on the verge of suicide a lot, um, and is overall just kind of a very broken person. But very intelligent. Very intelligent. Is very aware of his surroundings and what he's doing and things like that. Um, I guess the best way to describe Johnny would be a mix of Beetlejuice and Dexter, where he's extremely charismatic. That's what makes him so likable. Is he has this personality of, I don't know. It's just interesting. Like he's like I said, he's very intelligent. Has this sort of manic, like just manic aura about him. Again, like Beetlejuice does, he has this not necessarily disgusting personality, but a personality that you probably shouldn't be drawn towards, but you are. He makes you drawn towards him. Wherein his Dexter-like qualities comes in, again, is the very intelligent, very, introverted, and very self-reflective. Um, but yeah, it's just I really enjoy Johnny's character overall. It's extremely complex. He's a very complex character. Um, so throughout the story, it the first issue kind of introduces us into Johnny. Obviously, we're introduced to another main character, Todd or Squee, who is a little boy that lives next door to Johnny. Um, and that's sort of our first interaction, is kind of the banter between them, whereas this terrorized little kid who has horrible parents and this seemingly crazy person. But Johnny tends to, I guess, kind of connect with Todd in the feeling that Todd and him are both alone in the world. Not much is known about Johnny's origin other than his parents were murdered and he became an orphan. That's really all we know about Johnny's past. Even he himself doesn't know much about his past. He doesn't know where he came from or anything like that. He just remembers his parents' murder. Not even so much who did it. I mean, it could have possibly been him. But yeah, so that's just kind of a nuance to Johnny's character. He's this person, obviously, that does wrong. He murders. He kills people in extremely graphic ways. But at the same time feels this sort of need to look after Squee and protect him. So yeah, you get a lot of different aspects throughout Johnny's journey, I guess, sort of to discover who he is. He gets a love interest. He he goes to heaven. He goes to hell. Um, and it's just a lot of, like I said, him self-discovering, trying to figure out who he is, and why he works the way he does. So yeah, story-wise overall, it's great. I think the pacing's fantastic. There's a very wide variety of characters, which I'll give a sort of breakdown. There's obviously we've met Squee. There's Johnny's love interest, Devi, who is a wonderful character. I love Devi's character. I really don't want to spoil too much, but she kind of gets her own spin-off series, which I didn't actually even know until recently when I picked this back up. I didn't realize she had gotten her own series back then when Johnny ended. But I love her character. There's also Mr. F and Psycho Doughboy, who are Pillsbury Doughboy mascots that Johnny painted himself into these grotesque caricatures of the character. And they become sentient when Johnny is spiraling into a depression that ultimately sort of play his a fractured sense of his angel and devil on each of his shoulders, where Mr. F is someone who helps Johnny revel in his feelings of depression, but not to the point where he wants to commit suicide. Mr. F has his own ulterior motives as to why he needs Johnny alive. So he does his best to sort of not necessarily lift Johnny up, but kind of prevent him from taking that final step. Whereas Psycho Doughboy is the complete opposite. He's essentially the devil on Johnny's shoulder. He tells Johnny to revel in these feelings of depression and hopelessness. He urges Johnny to end his life, again, for an ulterior motive that's later discovered. But I really like both characters because it's sort of Johnny portraying his inner thoughts to these characters in a way that helps him bounce his thoughts back and forth. which then introduces the Nail Bunny character, which was a pet bunny that Johnny purchased for one day, fed him once, and then nailed to a wall. Um, but Nail Bunny sort of kind of plays the middleman between everybody. I feel like he is Johnny's overall guardian angel in a sense, where he will let Johnny revel in his feelings and accepts those feelings, but tries to help him out of that depression and convinces him why suicide is not the answer. He tries to convince, Johnny, you're always going to have these feelings that you have, but that doesn't necessarily make you a completely broken person. You can get on with life. You can find snippets of happiness in your life. So, like I said, the cast of characters is extremely vast and complex, and adds a lot, not only to the overall story, but to Johnny's character development throughout. And so yeah, the cast of characters is fantastic. One thing I really appreciate with Jonan's work is he's not afraid to bring Johnny down to size, in a sense. Johnny's monologues are very melodramatic and flowery in the prose, and but he'll often catch himself realizing he's being over dramatic in his speech, in the way he's, I guess, handling the situation he's in, which I like. Like I said, it really helps ground Johnny when he is in this huge manic high of, you know what, I am what I am. I'm going to embrace the murder in me. I'm going to just enjoy it. This is what I want. But then it's like I said, Vasquez will bring him down to level in especially certain scenes where Johnny is struggling with the feeling of nothingness. There's like one scene where he has banter between a victim and himself, where the victim isn't scared to die. Like, he has faith in God and all that. And, him and Johnny sort of get into this pseudo conversation of religion. And, after Johnny kills him, the last panel is him just standing there saying, well, that did nothing for me. And, I really resonate with Johnny a lot in a lot of levels. Not so much the murderous aspect, but I really can relate to sometimes the feeling of nothingness. There are sometimes I walk into my library and it is the happiest place I could be. I love it. I love the smell, the look, the feel, everything. But there's also times where I walk in it and it's just like, I could set fire to this place right now and just not care. It's not doing anything for me. And, for teenage me, that was really, really helpful, and I don't think I knew it at the time. I really think I really started to wane in interest in Johnny once it started to focus more on the story of him trying to figure out who he is and straying away from the random acts of violence and toilet humor and things like that. So I'm really happy I was able to go back and kind of revisit those deeper messages and more complex subplots, and just have a better understanding for them. Excuse me. Lost my train of thought there. But yeah, so there's scenes where Johnny will be having there's one scene in particular that I really love. It's sometimes Jonan will switch the title for it'll called Johnny the Suicidal Maniac, and which again just kind of shows more of the humor that Vasquez has. It's not so much always random and toilet. Like, there's some really witty stuff in there that I love. But essentially Johnny goes to a convenience store to get a slushie, and when he discovers the slushie machine is down, he is in an instant depression. Like, that's it. I'm going to kill myself, and I'm taking you with me. And, he kills the guard, not the guard, excuse me, the store clerk. And as he's about to pull the trigger on himself, he realizes that the other slushy machine is up. And, just like that, he's back in a good mood. He throws money on the counter and leaves. Again, sort of playing into that humorous side where it's, even Johnny has his morals. He's not a thief. But, behind the humor of that, I appreciate that it's, because even Johnny goes into detail of it. It's not the slushy that is why he is suddenly in this depression. It's another thing that was ripped away from him that he knew was going in that moment. He knew what was going to make him happy, and outside circumstances took that away from him. And it's that feeling of powerlessness and feeling of hopelessness that leads you into the spiraling of that feeling. And I really appreciate that because, again, I have those sort of feelings at times where it's, something stupid and small just triggers it, and it's not necessarily that stupid, inconvenient thing. It's everything else that's been building up behind it. That's just the trigger that caused everything to tumble with it. So I really appreciate Jonan's, attention to detail on that, essentially. So, there's a lot of that thrown in. Again, but there's, like I said, there's also great humor in it. Jonan will throw in little, like, fourth wall breaking messages in the panel where it's, it's a little humor to break up the tension of a very serious scene. And it works so well. Like, I really wish I could kind of pinpoint. Oh, there's these two characters that come on later. And I really don't want to spoil it because it's like, the male character is just such a typical, like, jerk. He's traveling with this woman that is essentially trapped in Johnny's house, and he's just this chauvinistic pig, like, and it's like, it's so funny how blatantly, like, disgusting he is as a character, but in a way it's funny because he's just so over the top with it. You're just like, and he doesn't realize it, and like, you're just like, wow. But let me show off some of the artwork just so you can kind of get a feel of what is. You know what? First of all, let me prove this kind of the kind of humor that I like. So one of the first kind of scenes we're introduced into Johnny is when someone is doing door-to-door surveys. And it's funny because, like, in this panel here, we'll see the guy mentions, like, hey, your door number is 777. Isn't that like the number for heaven or something? And then we have Johnny's very blatant response, does this look like heaven? And that just cracks me up every single time because it's just like, that's kind of his jerk side coming out, where it's like, his disdain for people and their stupidity really comes out, and he's just like, mm-hmm. But just to kind of give you an idea of the violence Johnny is capable of, like, we see that somebody is actually hooked up to his doorbell, so whenever somebody rings it, he gets a shock. There's the blender, the toaster, the toilet, I think. So there's some of that, like, the way Johnny kills people is extremely unique, you know what I mean? It's obviously over the top kind of thing, but it's like, it's almost still kind of plausible in a way, like some of this stuff. But like, oh, see, this is one of my favorite panels in the entire series. Is just, he goes into this cafe and just completely loses it. Like, he's on this major, like, tirade of, like, basically why he's doing what he does. Like, he attacks basically every social class, um, I guess, sort of a label. He attacks, the nerds and, women and jocks and punks, the punk scene, and, everything. He just gets all this frustration out. And I really love that. Like I said, it's just this pure chaos going on. And it's just like, you know, it's really one of those moments where you kind of like, I wish I could do that sometimes. Again, not so much killing people, but like when you've just completely had it and you just want to freaking go nuts and just, you know what? That's it. I'm going to go insane and have a moment. And it's just kind of like living vicariously through Johnny in that way. Um, but yeah, uh, I guess some of the critiques I would have is some of the humor unfortunately doesn't hold up. Like I said, a lot of it is kind of crude toilet humor, and obviously, 14-year-old me found that hysterical. 34-year-old me, not so much. Um, so it definitely does kind of age itself in that way. Um, and I guess the only really major gripe I have is more so centered around the director's cut of the book rather than the overall story. So, excuse me, Devi gets introduced to us in a Meanwhile strip, which is essentially kind of like a subplot thrown into the story. And normally they're the funny little things that don't really add to the story, minus this one, which was Devi's. And she's on a first date with this guy, and it ends up going terribly. The guy ends up It's one of the funniest freaking scenes in comic history, in my opinion. In my genuine opinion, I think it's one of the greatest comics ever drawn. He ends up getting diarrhea and crapping himself. And the way he gets out of the date is he just stands up and screams in the restaurant, "Oh my god, somebody put shit in my pants!" And just flees into the bathroom. And it's just hysterical. But that's missing from this, and I don't understand why. Like, because, again, it introduces Devi, an extremely pivotal character, not only to the story, but in Johnny's overall character development. And, there's references later on in the story from Devi herself, and even even other characters kind of mention the incident. And it's like, if you haven't read it, it's going to go right over their head, and I think that's like, that's some of the humor that's going to get missed in some like really nice callbacks to earlier plot points in the story that is just going to get missed because it's missing that introductory scene of Devi. So I guess it's just kind of more of a nitpick on my end. Like, you can still read this and get the full grasp of the story, but I really think that was a big misstep leaving out that Meanwhile. And, I mean, the other thing I really don't think aged super well is the Happy Noodle Boy mini comics. Basically, Happy Noodle Boy is a comic that Johnny drew, and it's just this vulgar stick figure that is completely random. He shouts random stuff, does random things, and things like that. And, again, 14-year-old me loved the randomness to it and thought it was funny. The stuff that he said, nipples, I have no nipples, stare into my navel, and random stuff to random people. It's hysterical. But now, I don't know. I felt myself really kind of skimming past those pages because it's just not my humor anymore. Don't come for me, fans of the series. I know Happy Noodle Boy is pivotal, like, to a lot of people's teenage years, and I'm not saying it should have been removed or anything. You know, I'm happy he's still there, but for me personally, I think I've just kind of outgrown Happy Noodle Boy. But overall, I'm going to give Johnny the Homicidal Maniac a solid 5 out of 5. Sure, it's probably some nostalgia talking, and may have a little bias to it, but overall, I really think this is a wonderful story of, self-discovery, mental illness, and, that we all have this little darkness inside of us that we try to hide and we try to shove away because we're told to do so. But you know what? Instead of me trying to say it, I'm going to read the foreword that will explain it better than I ever could. Let's see here. And this is by Rob Schrab, written in June of 1997. Excuse me. A girl I dated once said to me, "You only feel when you bleed." This must give you the impression that I was dating an art school vampire. She was more like an acid-washed Molly Ringwald, but that doesn't matter. I fell in total lust with her, because she told me what I had been thinking my entire life. Pain is a food that is essential to the growth of one's soul. Let's talk about violence, shall we? Violence in the media is an easy target. If we get rid of all the violent movies, television shows, and comic books, the world will be utopian. An easily believable answer. Just ask your mom. Jonan Vasquez has touched something important here. There's a little monster inside all of us, a little wolf-faced monkey that needs to be satiated. As people, we mustn't ignore that monster. If we do, we cheat ourselves. We deny an emotion, a feeling. Think of someone who pissed you off. Some yutch who cut you off in traffic. A prick-ass Kinko's employee who took 3 hours to copy your resume. The big bully who spit in your face when you were 8. Now, in your head, relive that moment. But this time, however, don't just stand there and take it. This time you've got a knife. Pull it up from behind your back and watch the status flip-flop. Suddenly, Mr. Kinko isn't so cocky. The playground bully is crying for his mother. Smell their fear. Then kill them. Kill them like you see in the movies. Make it as horrible as possible. Release that monster and stab that knife deep into their face. As humans, we're taught to forget that we are animals. Animals kill to survive, and it's just as natural for us. To deny nature is to deny life. Now that you've committed murder in your dream world, relax. Take a deep breath, give your monster a high five, and put him away. You've just used an evil fantasy to keep you civilized and sane. Some may call this irresponsible advice. They kid themselves that their monster doesn't exist. And when a person lies to themselves, there is less chance for spiritual growth. More than likely, their monster will step out of the dream world and into the real world. That's how a society gets messy. Lots of neglected, hungry monsters. Johnny the Homicidal Maniac gives our monster something to chew on. It's pain food that wears its teeth down. Johnny represents Jonan Vasquez's monster. Vasquez and his fans are all the stronger because of him. And with that, I couldn't agree more. But thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Before I do cut it off, I just want to say the channel's officially past 200 subscribers, which is just completely insane to me. I know a lot of people say it all the time. I've heard it thousands of times myself, but unless you've lived it, it's honestly really true. Like it's kind of really humbling that anyone cares to sit and listen to what I have to say and think about anything. Like I've always said, I do this for fun. Reading's my passion. I love to get the word of horror out there. And, I just really appreciate all of you. Anyone who takes the time to like or comment, it genuinely brightens my day, even on the hardest of days that I'm having. Seeing something like a simple comment, much like Johnny's slushie, can instantly turn my day around. Thanks again, everyone. Feel free to leave a like. Drop a comment down below letting me know one of your favorite teenage stories. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.